today.
You asked for it.
I did.
Did we?
Well, no, I guess you guys didn't.
Well, I, for the record, did offer it to bring it at some point, even before it was
Yeah.
brought up by a citizen, so it
Yep.
hadn't been scheduled yet, but. Um, So I thought we'd start with the independent auditor's report, and then Kathleen prepared some supplementary information. And really, maybe first things first, I'd like to introduce Evan Reed. He has begun a year-long, I call it internship, it's actually, we need to use the correct terminology, he's a Vista, AmeriCorps Vista member. But he'll be working with economic development for the coming year, doing arts-based community development.
In conjunction with Grace Studio.
Okay. That's real cool.
So focus
to meet
on
you.
kind of the community arts center and programming.
But
So you're from out of state?
I'm from California.
Oh.
Had a long way here. My car broke down in New Mexico, so here I am.
In Gallup?
Yes, in Gallup. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Seems like they always break down there.
Yeah.
Oh.
What part of California?
I'm from the Los Angeles area. Yeah. So yeah, just got my degree in arts administration from California Polytechnic School in San Luis Obispo, and I'm excited to bring more access to the arts to rural Kansas.
Good,
Cool.
good. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
So delving into the auditor's report. Logical place to start is on the statement of financial position,
Is that page 2?
page 2. From 2019 to 2020, there wasn't a big change. Total net assets, or total assets for the organization, 4.8 million, down a little bit, probably some from operations and some from depreciation. You know, of course, a big piece of our financial picture is the grocery store. So that's reflected in buildings. That also includes rental houses. We have a Maxville, a duplex in Maxville and a house in Hudson, and the incubator, the building at 311 Broadway. So, can let you review it. If you have questions, I think there's additional detail as we go to the next page.
This loans payable, that's the grocery store.
Which one are you looking at?
Long-term
Loans-
liabilities, loans
Yes.
payable.
Yeah, the loans payable, vast majority of that is the, well, all of it on the, is the
That's
grocery store.
Yeah.
Network loans payable, Kansas loans payable, that is us participating in the e-community loan program. So we can extend low-interest loans to business owners, but we're specifically getting the money from Network Kansas to do that. So they're loaning us money that we're loaning out. And that's why it, and we have to pay it back as the customer pays us back. So that's why it shows as a liability to the Economic Development Organization.
Okay.
Total revenues into the organization, I think, and again, Kathleen has prepared some even greater detail on this, but we often, I think, have to help people understand what role the county's support of our organization plays. So I would say we absolutely, I mean, it's the unrestricted base funding for the organization. It's very important to us to be able to just continue operations, but it doesn't entirely pay for operations, and the majority of our budget comes from the things that we have, you know, the activities that we bring in. So we either bring in grants for specific activities, or we're building some assets that generate revenue. And, you know, so total measured by expenses of the organization for the year was $600,000, of which county appropriations were $89,000. Yeah. And I don't know if we'd like to kind of delve into a little more, where does our organization actually receive the funding? And that's the pie chart that,
Revenue gains and other support pie chart kind of shows, so Stafford County's 1 mil of commitment was about 15% of our revenue from last year. The next kind of large portion was, we had 13, and almost 0.5% in government grants. Part of that was PPP grant to help with stuff, but we also received the rest of our USDA Rural Business Development Grant, which was for renovating Workspace 311 and offering programming there.
Are you going down from the top to the bottom?
Should've said.
I kind of,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so 15% was the largest. We have the individual contributions. The foundation grants were small. We had some from the Ministerial Alliance to help when there was interns with food stuff, and then Golden Belt Community helped. That was funding to remove the house in Hudson, so it's from the Hudson Community Fund. The corporate grants, we had a small one from Midwest Energy, Golden Belt Telephone. We can collect Best Choice labels, so we got $60 from turning in Best Choice labels, and then we get a little kickback if people use Amazon Smile, and have EcoDevo as the designated charity. So then the government grants are, we had the USDA, which was almost $43,000, and that was the workspace. The City of St. John, that's $50,000, and that's part of their 10-year commitment to giving us $50,000 a year for the development of the grocery store. Kansas Creative Arts Industry, we got $7,500 for the mural. We got another $2,100 for maintenance of the mural. And then there was $2,000 that we got from Spark funding for technology. There's also discounted, they discount the pledge since the City of St. John is $50,000. It comes out in the report as they discount the pledge. And then the PPE was about $18,600, so $18,600. The community loan, instead of using a bank to process the loans, we do it in-house, so we take kind of a cut before we send it off to Network Kansas. Fiscal sponsorship, the largest came from the port. We received $150,000 as pass-through money from the state for the port, and so that was for legal and technical. We did a pass-through of $21,500 for the Spark food program, so that was directly Spark money from the county, but then we wrote direct checks to the Ministerial Alliance here in Maxville and Stafford, Core here, and so it was distributed between the different communities and stuff. Also in fiscal sponsorship, we received $7,500 from the Church of Jesus Christ, and that was for the mural project. And we had one of the Rural Opportunity Zone RAWS program participants. There was another pass-through there of $1,500. In terms of kind of the rental, how that breaks out is that $70,000 comes from rent at the marketplace. We received $21,500 from housing, and the business incubator had about $4,000 in rent come in. The miscellaneous income includes neighborhood revitalization on the duplex in Maxville, membership fees to the workspace, and then other miscellaneous expenses. We received the 1% sales tax from the grocery store as part of the TIF that was passed by the City of St. John. That all goes towards paying off the debt essentially that we have. The interest income is just from our general checking accounts. The property tax refund is also related to the TIF district, and that goes towards funding the grocery store. And then the small amount is net gains on assets.
Good.
On your pie chart here, it says the 8.95% fuel fees. Is that what you get off fuel pumps out of the?
Cemetery
Yeah.
in the far
Yes.
corner.
Okay.
This is currently their.
Yeah, so
We
we
get,
were-
we get 5 cents of
They
every
want
gallon
to
pumped,
expand their
as long as the
boundary,
margins are positive.
taking all
Yeah,
the.
if they were actually losing money on gas, we wouldn't get any, but we get 5 cents of
Which
every
would
gallon
be taking
pumped.
some away from
Um,
Stafford Cemetery
If
District.
the margin is 5
I'm
cents,
not
or if
sure
the
how
margin's
they do
positive.
that.
From 5 cents, if the margin is more than 5 cents, from 5 cents to 8 cents,
Valuation.
White's
Yeah.
keeps as their payment
They
for
just-
credit card processing.
I don't
And
know.
then margin
Drew,
above
see,
8 cents
you know
per
Drew?
gallon is split 50/50
He
between
came in
White's
and asked me about
economic
it.
development.
I pulled some
So,
statutes,
Um,
but
this
like
year
I said,
margins
I
have
don't
been good,
know,
And it's actually given us some cushion.
I'm
We've
not for sure.
met the budgeted
I really
amount
don't
to
know where to
receive
start looking.
for fuel fees already in 2021 in June.
Okay.
So
He said,
it's helping us
He-
just
Jay
a little
Menace
bit of
is-
cushion there to
is
make sure
on
that,
this-
you know,
the board
in
of
future
this
years, if there's any
cemetery district. He
shortfalls,
said he
different
talked to
things,
Jay.
will
So you'll put
Jay
that
was
away
okay
for
with
cushion?
it, but
So who
I'm
has to
still
pay
not sure
the
the
maintenance and
process.
stuff,
If-
upkeep on the pumps, you guys?
We
I
do.
just don't know.
No,
This is
not
yours,
pumps.
fine.
Not the pumps.
Now, general ongoing
sure there's
operations,
ways
it's White's. Like, for example, they had a fire and freezer in this last year. We hardly even knew about it. Their insurance covered it.
Yeah, but as far as the fuel pumps.
Fuel pumps, they're,
Because we pay.
Well,
their
that's
annual
what I
fee.
don't know, if it has to
but
go.
not the maintenance.
Not the
maintenance.
We own the
This
property.
cemetery
It's licensed
district
to Stafford County
is
Economic
not
Development. We
that
have to
much.
pay
It's
the
they're not.
fee to be licensed as a, you know, owning
It's not
those
that big a
fuel
deal.
tanks.
As far as
And,
money.
The maintenance of it
But-
is White's responsibility.
Yeah, I don't
They
know if
have
you
a
just
lot
get
of
their board
attention
approval
with the
and you
supplier
can do
of
it, or if
the
it has
pumps.
to,
It's,
you know. be
actually, I was
approved.
about to get pulled into the middle of me.
I don't know, since the cemetery board members aren't
coronavirus
elected.
hit, and then everybody focused on other things, and
Yeah.
By,
Yeah.
by themselves, I guess, I don't know. No, we don't, see, these are all cemetery districts in the county, it's ridiculous. But, no, they just
Let's
kind
see.
of, well, I went off the board.
this
so
just
I
breaks
got-
out,
I got Rob to take.
kind
What
of,
page are you on?
oh,
That's what
well,
most of them do.
I had clicked
So,
on page 5,
I don't
guess.
know,
Okay.
Page 4.
Okay.
I feel like what Kathleen gave you was greater detail.
last week they talked
This
about the.
consolidates categories
the dairy
more on
farming.
page 4.
Yeah,
than
This
she
is just the
went over,
history that I could
so
find of when they passed it and then when they
Same
rescinded it.
thing.
Page,
There's not
Page
much
4 is
detail,
the
I went back through the minutes, it started in
And the-
1994.
Okay, I'm sorry,
Printed on
yes,
that
20,
paper started it.
I saw that.
It's very sketchy in here, I highlighted all of
Right.
the reference
Yeah.
to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he would be the one to go talk to about it.
this
find out the details,
categorizes
but
the
this
types of
is pretty
expenses we
sketchy, but
have.
that's all I could find.
I need.
The- In the total of 2020 total expenses, that will match up with the changes in the total
Okay.
expenses on page 3
You
for
fired me?
2020. So,
He
600,000.
fired me.
One of the things that this doesn't show
Yeah.
is,
our principal payments on the loans. That's reflected in our cash flow, but it's not considered part of the expenses.
from an accounting perspective, it's a payment on an asset, it's not an expense. But we look at it as, we need to be prepared to make that payment, it's an expense
Yeah.
we have to pay, but, you know, they ask us, one of the questions Kathleen had this morning is, you know, why is the amount for management in general, if we were to flip back to page 3, it's only 57,000. Well, we have more expense in overseeing the management of the organization than that. Well, the answer is the auditors always ask me to kind of give them an estimate of how our time is divided in overseeing the organization versus carrying out activities. So not all of our time is all like the administration of bookkeeping and, you know, all that stuff. So that's what they split out as an estimate as management in general, and the things that we would be doing to carry out a program activity is reflected in program services. So I can just let you kind of look through, I guess, what the categories of expenses are.
I guess the technical assistance was probably the Sparks
Just
management.
well, no, the technical assistance
Yeah.
on there is not for the Spark. That is primarily for the 150,000 that went towards the legal fees and all of
Yeah.
that for that
Oh, for the.
port.
Port.
Yeah, that was not the Spark fund. That was not
Well,
county Spark funding. Like, it is from the CARES stuff, but it was not county Spark level.
Correct.
And then the other part of the technical fees is we had 16,500 was part of the legal services to do an industrial revenue tax bond on the grocery store project. And so that came due last year.
You know, we pay property taxes, so in 2020, that's a big line item, 73,501 was in property taxes paid. And the reason it's bigger than it, we paid 3/4 of property tax on the grocery store. So to that point, we've been paying, or not,
A quarter at a time.
3/2. We had been paying in December and May, and last year we paid December, May, and December again. So going forward, all of our rebate will be received in the same year that we're paying taxes for it. It'll be cleaner. We had the cash on hand to be able to do it last year.
Rural Opportunity Zone, what is that?
So it's the ROS program, so essentially it was for people who moved back to the county after, or moved to the county after completing a degree. And so it was to do a match where they get an income, they don't have to pay income taxes, and then that helps pay on their student loans. So that was a pass-through that we did with the final year for that individual.
Okay.
And how many do we have take advantage of that? Was it 2?
Well,
In the beginning, it was 2.
oh, in the very first year, it took a little time for there to be participation. Eventually, we had all of the slots filled plus people on a waiting list. So I think at its peak, we were paying for 5 or 6 individuals. But then people were on a waiting list, so we weren't able to really use it to recruit people in because, you know, that the funding from the county's perspective was coming from economic development's budget. And we at one point, out of the budget that we received, out of the 89,000 or so that we received, were dedicating 10,500 of it to Rural Opportunity Zone. We didn't have an unlimited amount of, you know, capacity to do that. And at that point, people are on a waiting list. It's not even really bringing people to the county. We just kind of had questions as to whether it was a tool that was really achieving anything. We continue to have available the employer sponsor option. So if an employer wants to use that program to recruit a new employee, they can sponsor someone, and instead of it coming out of the county or economic development's budget, it meets the requirement of the state because the match is there. But as far as like, you know, we had, one of the things that I was uncomfortable with in the way the program was executed is that although we had to commit funding to it, we had no ability to approve which people were participating in the program. That was all done by the state. People were, you know, in the process of submitting that application was cumbersome to individuals. So I don't think it was even a positive experience for a lot of people.
This program was designed by the state with no funding. We had $0 coming from the state, although.
They'll pay $1,500
Yeah.
if
Yeah,
1,500
yes.
is coming from a local entity, whether that's, and they intended for it to be counties. They then said, well, if you want to have an employer sponsor, you can. Well, honestly, we sponsored an employee, And there's a provision where you can also sponsor your employee's spouse. Well, we received a donation in order to provide, it was a pass-through, to provide that match for the spouse. I don't know, we figured out ways to kind of help make it work better, but it's cumbersome. We still have, but this is the resolution you all passed just within the last month or whatever. We're still opted into the program, we just aren't committing funds to it.
So it's still an option. We don't currently have anyone enrolled in it, but when you do have new people moving to the county, it's something we can look at.
Only if we get,
As long as an employer or someone's willing to
Yeah.
do the, like, yes, but
there are some in our county that employ, we just don't see the money, it doesn't flow through us,
Yeah.
but the employers are paying it directly.
I think it's interesting that you pay just as much property tax as you do in salaries, or roughly,
and that was again kind of
you know?
high
I mean,
for that
that's
year.
pretty,
Yeah.
that's pretty, as far as a business goes, you know, if you or I are running a farm or a business, that's to pay more, or just as much property taxes, salaries, that's saying something.
And so, like, the last line on here shows the interest paid, the 52,762. So that's interest on the grocery store loan, but it doesn't show kind of the principal payments. The principal payments are about 140, so we've had almost 200,000 goes just to paying kind of the loans. We have one zero interest loan, and then we have one that does have interest.
Okay.
Page 6, or I guess we, actually,
Page 7
Yeah.
through the end is just kind of their summary
right,
of
there, yes.
how they
summary.
arrived at all these numbers.
Exactly, some additional detail. There's one that I might kind of, on page 13, isn't something we've already talked about. Grants and grants receivable. So we have a 10-year commitment, well, 10 years starting in 2018, from both the City of St. John and the Odd Fellows to make yearly payments that are part of us being able to pay that zero interest 10-year loan on the grocery store. So that is considered a grant receivable in you know, their accounting. So all of this that's reflected is the grocery store, but I think something to, you know, when I think of the activities of 2020, we received grant awards, didn't receive the grant, but received notification that we were approved for 2 different housing awards. And that's not reflected here because the grant agreement wasn't actually executed. We received written notice that we were selected, but it required, you know, additional preparatory work before the grant agreement was actually signed, and so it's not on here, but that's nearly $1 million in total that will be reflected in 2021. So, I don't know if it's also kind of worth reviewing the idea that a lot of the activities that we engage in over the course of the year, if we were to look strictly at the financial statements, aren't going to reflect that. Some of the things that we do with organizations outside of our own to write their grants, for example. So, for example, in 2020, we helped I mean, I wrote the grant application for the city of Stafford to the Moderate Income Housing Program. So when they received $150,000 for their, $125,000 for their land bank, it's not something that's reflected on our financial statements, but it was a part of the programming activities that we do. Gray Studio similarly received grants that we helped write. When we did the Moderate Income Housing Program for the county, which of course the housing work was work that we did, but the county was the eligible entity. That's not something that's reflected on our financial statements. That was a multi-year program that sponsored down payments for 2 houses in, it was available countywide, but the 2 that participated in it were in St. John. And we had the $50,000 that was not used that the state allowed us to redirect toward the partnership project with Kansas State University. So that's how we were able to pay our part of the house on 8th and Broadway, which to me, that was a project that took a long time to execute, but the value of it was as much as anything because it gave us a prototype that told a good story in grant applications, and I think was a big part of being able to actually get that kind of grant funding coming to us for the remaining 9 houses that will be throughout the county.
Will they be all the same construction style as that?
Fundamentally, yes. It's the same layout, but they are going to use a different methodology. They're not going to, in the house that we're contracting for in Hudson first, the contractor is using traditional stick framing. And we are talking with another contractor who hasn't finalized his bid. I'm hoping that we'll be able to do both at the same time so that we can get the houses built. And this individual is looking at buying prefabricated panels for the exterior framing and traditional roof trusses. So it won't be all the same methodology, but a lot of it's the fundamental same layout and most things is the same with some value engineering is the way I look at it.
I went to just got back from California the other day, and up in the Chico area where the big fires were at last year, or campfire deal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most of the housing got burned up, and several of my relatives are having houses built with that same kind of construction. But I mean, and it's out of the Canadian company that's coming down, and they're probably doing 35% of the houses there. And the only reason why they're not doing more is because that's all they can, their maximum capacity. But they can bring in a, well, let's see, what was it, around a 3,000 square foot house, and have it put together and ready to go in like 3 days.
Wow.
But it's panelized construction, is that correct?
Yeah, total interior walls, everything is all that foam board. But when they set it up, it's already got stucco on the outside and sheetrock on the inside, and everything's grouped for plumbing and electrical.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you look at them, you can't, they look good.
I think the thing is you gotta have a contractor that's comfortable with that, you know, and finding contractors at all. I mean, I have given bid
we ran into
documents
that
to
too.
18 contractors to try to even get responses. And so we're gonna be glad to get them built with contractors. I think there is room for maybe figuring out how to help them learn about new construction methods, but some are more receptive to that than others, so. The one that we have that's looking at panelized construction for houses in Stafford, he has personal experience with it. He and his family built his brother's house with panels a few years ago. Person isn't a full-time independent contractor, but he is a project manager for another construction company and is considering doing this kind of on the side. And I think has the qualifications to get it done if he can make it.
He can get his bids back.
Exactly, if he can get his bids back, that's so true. He would be subbing more of the work. Van, our first contractor, is. Our first contractor, I think a major part of how he is achieving the price point that we are wanting is that he's self-performing almost all of it, except HVAC, electrical, and plumbing. And I think that's something I have learned from the K-State House is when you've got a number of subcontractors involved, everybody's got to have their margin. I mean, the expense, it's gotten more expensive than was projected. Some of the other things that I would kind of point out is things that we've been working on that aren't in financial documents. We have an ag product company looking at Stafford. That began in 2020, and we've been working with them to, for example, figure out with Kansas Gas Service if they can upgrade the lines to support, the amount of gas that they would need to run this kind of company.
How's that going?
Very well.
Good? They're gonna
Like
try
Kansas
to
Gas
be able to-
Service has been great to work with. They're
Yeah.
willing to do all of the upgrades required at no expense up front to the company.
Great.
So, that's been a very, very positive aspect of it. Right, and again, this isn't 2020, this is now into 2021, but yesterday, we facilitated a phone call with BNSF. So, this company, doesn't require rail service, but likes the idea of having that option to keep their transportation costs in check. They'd be bringing in raw material from New Mexico, and so.
Is this a fertilizer manufacturer?
It's not actually fertilizer, it's an additive, but it's used in conjunction with fertilizer. I may have said that incorrectly in the past.
It is not a fertilizer company. They make an organic product that is used with fertilizer to improve efficiency, to like reduce leaching and things like that.
Yeah, is that a situation where they can use that small spur that's there
That's the
to
question.
offload just to,
Yes, and so that's some of what we've been trying to evaluate, like with the railroad, is the spur in the condition that it needs to be in for the BNSF to use it. And, what would it take to get the service agreement in place? There is an existing service agreement, but it's not transferable from one company to the next. What is it going to take to implement a new service agreement? So I think the railroad was, for their part, very reasonable to work with. I feel like that is going as it should. Those are the kinds of things that we often spend our time doing. I feel like as we should, but it's not going to be reflected in our financial statements. There's a consultant that works with both the city of St. John and the city of Stafford because they each have their own municipal electric generation. He has he's suggesting a strategy to them to invest in solar, their own solar panels as a price hedge over the next 20 years for what they buy from Midwest Energy. They're doing kind of some feasibility analysis of it right now, but I've worked with him in terms of figuring out, like if you did this kind of thing, what kind of land might be available. We looked at 2 or 3 lots in Stafford. We looked at the Stafford Airport. I don't know, on and on. He's looking to me because he doesn't know the area as well, and I can get out a plat map and know who different players are and who we might, what places we might consider either approaching or that are already in the control of friendly hands, like, the Stafford Airport, at least it's owned by the city, We extended a new e-community loan for $45,000 last year, helping a business transfer from a retiring owner to a new owner. And we spent a lot of time on the Spark program.
yeah,
We had an intern program where we brought in total 5 interns over the course of the year, between AmeriCorps and our Bike and Build program. And, so I have notes of We may talk about dairy at some point in the future, but that's really more 2021, but there's some discussion about what developments might occur in that industry with the new cheese plant being announced in Dodge City. As you know, our county currently has a ban on any kind of
We've got
corporate
some
dairy
information
production.
here printed off on that
So,
in the minutes of 1994.
yeah, so, it's something I feel like maybe not with the current set of commissioners, but over the course of time, it's been a topic that's come up, and my interpretation of it was that the commission wasn't necessarily anxious to take action if there was an immediate, need for it or a specific interest, and it's not something we have focused on changing, but, and it's not, I've had discussions with a company in California. I've had one phone conversation with an owner of a dairy in California that's involved with Hilmar Dairy. And is someone that I will now be serving on a board of directors with, and will have an ongoing opportunity to interact with her. And I think she would be very willing to introduce us to the people that we would need to talk to if we were wanting to entertain the idea of recruiting dairies to, say, Western Stafford County or whatever.
I would say that we should, I'd be in favor of having some public informational meetings and see what the feedback is. And I think we need to find out what the rules and restrictions are, because nobody wants one built across from their house. But I'm sure there's some kind of restrictions that people need to know about as far as.
I think we should include Carl Miller.
Yeah, we spoke with them a little bit last week about it. I'd be in favor of looking at something like that as long as we could regulate the location via zoning,
Yeah.
And more or less restrict where they go from zoning, not with just a broad ban. Because if you have a ban, you might just take yourself off of the radar.
Well, that's the thing, yeah, like,
Yeah.
the reason that I think it even came up as a point of discussion, looking back whatever that was, 4 or 5 years ago, at that time, the state of Kansas was actively, through the Department of Ag, trying to attract companies from out of state. In California, they always attend a trade show in California. This one that was brought to my attention at the time happened to be from Arizona. And at the time, I think they were considering this area of Reno/Stafford County, but the state's basically telling them Stafford County's off the list.
Yeah.
They have and at the time, I didn't even know that resolution was on the books.
Another challenge.
They kept better track of it.
Another challenge that they might run into is with the KDHE is in GMD5 as far as water goes. They're gonna have to buy some pivots.
Well,
you would
I think they would no matter
Yeah.
what. Yeah.
Like we were talking last week, they want a big block of acreage. But as far as a broad
Yeah.
spectrum of a dairy, I think it's a good idea to have one as long as they're in the right place, because our farmers would greatly benefit from being able to sell grain to dairy, sell chopped alfalfa to dairy, haul manure out of the dairy. I have friends in western Kansas that certain parts of their business heavily, their farm relies on a dairy. So I think it'd be good to look at. We just need to make sure we're not gonna make a bunch of people mad and build them in the wrong spot, I guess.
Yeah, I think that maybe instead of waiting for a dairy to contact us, maybe we should go ahead and look into raising, because if the dairies are looking and they go, well, Stafford County has a ban on it, I could see about them going, well, we really don't want to fight it, trying to get a pass through. And get
It's
their
over
name,
before it even starts.
get their name slung in with it. I think we ought to look at raising the ban now.
Yeah.
But we do need to have some more conversation with Carl as far as zoning,
Yeah.
rules and regulations. And maybe have, I don't know, because KDHE's got to approve where a dairy goes to, right?
They have
There's-
to
that's
permit the
pretty-
lagoon.
Yeah,
So not every location is going to,
yeah, as far as the terrain and groundwater, depth to groundwater and things of that nature, they're going to be stringent
yeah,
on where you can put one anyway.
or what mitigation you have to do, what
Yeah.
kind of liner you have in the lagoon and things like that. I could quickly start exceeding my my expertise exactly on that, but they have to permit the dairy to
Yeah.
a certain location too, meaning
Mhm.
the level of concentration that it has, how many, cattle for the size of
Yeah.
the area that it has.
I think if it's done right, it could be a really good deal. Another thing we'd have to look at is access, I know Golden Belt, struggles sometimes with their access
Yeah.
into their feedlot. And you're gonna have a lot of raw materials coming in and out.
And you have to have property owners that are willing to sell.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the game too, is that, what's that?
For the right
For the
price.
right-
Yeah,
Yeah.
everything's for sale for that.
Exactly. Same.
Yeah.
So,
But I agree, we need to take a proactive approach on this, because even with KDHE, a study like that's gonna take months, if not a year.
I think the bigger, a not insignificant piece of it is even finding property owners that want to be a, part of it. I don't know, I think looking at, this is where I would like to have some discussions with the actual dairy companies that potentially might come here. I don't know what their specifications are,
Whether
and
they
I-
need one section of ground or 3 sections.
Exactly,
Five
so
sections.
the initial conversation I had was that, with her name's Kimberly, but she said that in theirs, they don't look to produce any of their grain inputs or whatever. They are
Yeah.
just looking to locate cattle, so the amount of space that they would look for is maybe less than some dairy,
Yeah, I think
Models that are
we're
around.
used to the little grow yards around, the ILS grow yards in Golden Belt, where they have a big block of acreage because they're turning cattle out on rye everywhere. Whereas a dairy is more confinement, to where they might not need as much acreage, and then if they're not gonna grow their own crops, or
Yeah.
not grow a lot of their own crops, they're gonna buy up circles for the water, and then,
So
Maybe not
this is
anymore.
not
Yeah.
coming from any of the California dairies, this is coming from when the Arizona dairy was coming here. But at that time, they were roughly looking for a section of contiguous land
Yeah.
with the water rights of about 4 circles, and I mean, water rights vary and everything, but that was roughly what they were looking for. And I don't know how that exactly compares here, but, again, I can look at plat maps, and there's nobody that owns one contiguous section, and especially if you start trying to find that place that is close enough to Eden Valley Road or any other paved road, then not everywhere is, just finding the land that meets the specifications is gonna be a not insignificant piece of the puzzle.
yeah.
I think you could transfer water rights. In fact, one of the ideas going through my head is if the Port Authority were to execute its purchase agreement on the land that we have, rights to purchase, it comes with a water right that isn't gonna be needed entirely for the purpose that we've set forth. Do we sell the water right? I think to help
Yeah.
development occur in a different part of the county. I don't know. So, I don't know, did you have any other piece of prep to, okay, so that's the overview
Yep.
of our finances. I don't necessarily think that this is something to delve into in depth today, but for what it's worth, I have read the 151 pages of regulations on ARPA funding. And so, I don't know how the county wants to approach, the idea of setting forth some potential priorities for it. I had sensed that there was an interest in trying to do fewer, more strategic expenditures with it.
Did Kyle call you yesterday from Golden Belt?
I was almost in meetings all day long
He's
yesterday.
gonna come and talk to the board on July 28th
Okay.
about
So,
broadband.
Broadband, so, yep,
I suppose,
for sure,
I mean, I told him to get you involved.
yes. And I've talked with them and honestly went to a Farm Bureau listening session yesterday that was attended by some, well, Secretary of Ag from Kansas and several others too, where this type of thing came up too. So, I'm not opposed to broadening, and this is what I told them about a different bucket of funding, but what's called capital funds, capital projects fund. That is an allocation of $140 million that the state's gonna get. Broadband is eligible for it.
Hold on just for a second. We're not holding you up, Mike, are we? You don't have
No, I've got
another
some time.
appointment? Okay.
Good, fine.
I know
Thank you.
we're running over. I just
Appreciate
wanted
it.
to make sure
You're
everybody-
good. I
Hold
don't
me
have
up
to be to
on the
Wichita
next
till
one.
noon, so
All right.
I'm
I
good.
actually have to be
I'm
in
good.
Bloomberg 11, so I can't talk forever either. Here's the thing that I can see, broadband's important. We want to see broadband investment, absolutely. They've already gotten a pretty good shot in the arm just in the last 6 months. But the other, there's like, I don't know, multiple. I was gonna say 7 to 10. There's multiple buckets of funding that broadband is eligible under. And I just think we need to be strategic about if there are priorities that we want to have funded and they're only eligible in, in another bucket, that we prioritize those where they're eligible instead of broadband, if we can also cover broadband in other buckets. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So, for example, the capital projects fund, this is the case I'm making to the state, is, that infrastructure is eligible in that, and there's even some stated priority at the federal level on rural infrastructure. So something like our port can be eligible under that category, but there's not gonna be other categories.
How is that COVID related? It's got to be,
Yep.
I mean, it all comes back to COVID. If we
Well,
can't make a case for it being COVID related, we're
And this
gonna
is-
get bounced.
But it
So this
comes
is
to
also-
the economic recovery, so this grant is less, so the ARPA funds are less restricted as the CARE funds were, so the CARES
Right.
ended up in
Yes.
we're very
CARES
much
were-
more towards
yes.
actually addressing COVID as it was happening. The ARPA is the rescue plan, so it's more looking at economic recovery, and so that includes economic development, that spurs kind of growth or restarting economies, as less so just looking at how does this directly like relate to coronavirus related things.
So I am talking about two different buckets here, even as we're talking here. So there's the county allocation of 807,000. That's what these regs are around. There's a separate bucket that the state's getting directly from the Department of Treasury for capital projects. And that's where I think we should really focus.
The broadband,
Well, no,
No,
the port.
or the board, okay.
Broadband's eligible in both of those
Okay.
categories. And also some other ones. Housing is very easily eligible in the county's allocation. Grants to nonprofits are very easily eligible in the county's allocation. I would need a specific, I feel like, interpretation if you wanted to say, let's buy land and like have site control and still ask for funding for developing it. What if we use the county's allocation to execute the purchase contract on land? Would that be eligible? Maybe, maybe not. I feel like that one's a little more in the gray area that I would want to have a specific interpretation before we acted on it.
Yeah.
Easy, much easier, housing, childcare.
I think we were gonna look at doing some rural sewer projects, weren't we?
Yeah, trying to do some funding to the natural resources.
Is that the 30,000 or whatever that you, I feel like there was like a 30,000-ish
I don't
kind
remember.
I
of.
don't know that we ever assigned a number to it, because they were gonna figure out who
They have
all.
like
who all
7 or
won.
8 people
We're
or,
not talking about a lot of money.
and they can only do 2 a year or.
Yeah, they can do 2 a year because they got their funding cut from the
Yeah,
state.
that's
They had like
the
7
program that they
applications. I think it would have been right around 30 because I think they
Is it?
cost share like 4,000
Okay.
a deal.
Yeah. But we're looking at doing that, but like I said.
Yeah.
Not just not much.
Yep. Okay,
All right.
all right.
Thank you,
Thank
Carol.
you.
Thank you all. Nice
Nice
to meet
meeting
you.
y'all.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
All right, Mike.
After all that, you ready for this?
Yeah.
How are you all today?
Good, how are you?
Good, I'm good. I'm good. All right. Well, we have, this is our time when we do kind of a 6-month review of your health plans that you have going. Last year when we met, we knew this year may have some challenges with some certain situations that were going on within the plan that has been happening. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Obviously, we don't talk about, try not to talk about names or actual conditions. But we do have, well, we'll get to that here in just a minute. As a reminder, I know that you guys look at this stuff once or twice a year and it can be very confusing. So you have a self-funded medical plan and you have a self-funded dental plan. The dental plan, typically, we don't need to worry about much. It's it's pretty level. We spend about the same amount of dollars every year. Employees like the dental plan, it works really well. It does not have stop loss on it because it's so predictable and there's no reason to pay for that. The medical plan is where we actually have an administrator of the plan, which is benefit management. It's been that way for 21, 22 years, maybe 20 years. Somewhere around there. And but we also have, with that, we have stop loss that we buy for protection every single year on this plan. We've talked about in the past, you've been fortunate over the years that you've built up a very nice reserve that actually is helping you right now in years like this year as we go through this. But you buy stop loss, okay? You buy stop loss that protects you all for catastrophic claims. And if you look at the top left right here, you have 2 types of stop loss. You have what's called aggregate stop loss, which is an umbrella over the entire group, okay? That is anybody, any claims up to your, up towards an individual stop loss limit goes towards that aggregate. So if you all of a sudden you had 30 people spend $45,000, that's 1.5 million or 1.4 million, whatever it is, you don't have to pay that because you've got an aggregate stop loss that's going to kick in at roughly $647,000. That's what that minimum attachment point is. Okay, so you've got an umbrella over the entire group, and then you also have what's called specific stop loss, which is the stop loss that's on every individual. And each year, the stop loss team, or the stop loss market, we take it to the market, we have a bunch of different stop loss carriers look at your stuff, and they either, at that time, approve everybody at that 45,000, and we've gone up a little bit every few years. We need to go up, you know, from 30 to 35 to 40 to 40. I mean, and so they look at it and they say, okay, we can either approve everybody at that $45,000, but you're going to pay this premium for that, or we can approve everybody on the plan at $45,000, but we've got these 2 issues that if they happen, then we won't put it in your premium that you're paying for stop loss. You'll just pay for it if it happens. Does that make sense? It's an underwriting process. So it's tried to protect you from having to those fixed costs, because fixed cost is your stop loss premium and your admin that you pay every year or every month for the entire year. And if we want to try to keep that fixed cost down as much as possible, and we just pay for the claims as they occur. Any questions on that? Okay. So this, what you have right in front of you is your current year. This is the current 6 months of this plan year. If we're going from top, at the top box, going left to right, you can see these are the dollars, where it says factors. These are the dollars that the county is setting aside every month to cover the claims. Okay?
These dollars here?
Those dollars, yeah, if you take the 652 where it says factors for a single, 1304 for employee spouse, 1174 and 1793, those are the dollars you're setting aside based off the enrollment, then you see your monthly attachment point of 49 to 50, depending on if your enrollment goes up or, and what tier it is, you can see. So you've actually grown a little bit this year in the number of employees on the plan, where you're at 47 right now. So you can see you actually, compared to January to June, you funded $5,000 more than what you did the first month of this year. And that's just because you've gained a couple of people. And so then you also have the premium billing. That's what you're paying every month for the stop loss coverage and administration. Almost all of that is the stop loss premium that you're paying. Okay? So right now, so far, you would have paid $106,000 in, and you would have funded into your account $309,000 to pay for claims. All right? So now if we jump down to the bottom, you can see that so far this year, though, we've had $360,000 of total paid claims, $310,000 of that medical, $50,000 of that prescription. Okay? Of that, now I'm going to say, we also have one other feature on our stop loss policy, and this is where it starts getting a little bit confusing, but you have what's called an aggregating deductible as well. An aggregating deductible is say, hey, the stop loss carrier said, hey, if you'll take on $50,000 worth of risk after somebody hits $45,000, okay? If you'll take on $50,000 risk, we'll drop your premium by $50,000. So it's a no-brainer. It's like, okay, we know we're gonna have to pay that $50,000, but let's shift that they'll lower that by 50 if you'll take on the risk throughout the year to pay the additional $50,000.
But you're gonna do it anyway, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. It's one of those no-brainer type
Yeah.
things to do, because it's a dollar for dollar savings to do
Yeah.
it. Yeah, it's just a way to try to, again, keep that fixed cost as low as possible.
Okay.
So you have a $50,000, that's what that aggregating deductible is right now. So far towards that, the county has paid about $3,900 towards that $50,000 additional deductible. Now, that's not per person, that's again collective over anybody who hits 45,000 or their specific, it goes towards that. So if I'm on your plan and I spend $50,000, then $5,000, the county covers the 45, and then they cover $5,000 that goes towards that $50,000 piece. And so right now, you got about $4,000 that has been spent by that, or that you've spent towards that additional deductible that's out there. You don't have anybody who's over their 45,000, except for, if you recall, when we had our meeting last year, and I know, Bryce, you were at the meeting, but
Yeah.
it was all new and you weren't on the board yet, but we had a couple of situations where they would not approve at $45,000. And again, they could have either built that into the cost or into the premiums that you pay on a monthly basis, or they specifically say you have to cover more on those conditions for those individuals. We have two of those. One of them has already hit their additional. That would be that first one, the $175,000. That you paid the first 45, and then had in the county out of your account has paid the 130 so far on that. Now the $90,000 one that was on there, which was 2 times, that is not coming to play yet, and that's why we don't mind having these, because a lot of times, rather than building it on the premiums, this will never happen. And I'll show you on last year's report the same thing. They could have built it in, but then it didn't end up happening fully, so it's better to have it this way than building it in on the premiums.
Yeah.
Then you have paid under the prior spec contract, so these are dollars that were paid by the reinsurance carrier for claims that occurred last year, but paid this year. These outside contracts, those are like medical necessity rule. Sometimes you have to have, or your plan says they're going to check for medical necessity. Is this procedure needed? Or there's some case management because you have some stuff going on within your plan. That $1,200 that you've paid so far this year covers those fees. So then you have a net paid claims. This would be all the claims that are on your plan right now that are not that $130,000 of laser. It's not that aggregating deductible or paid by the stop loss carrier, those kind of things. So you've got 221. So really, you're running okay at 71%, except for that one specific situation that we have going on that you've had to fund $130,000. So you've dipped into your reserve because you've paid this full $360 and you've only funded $309. So far this year, you've dipped into that reserve by about probably $50,000 or so, somewhere right around there. Which, remind me, we're at $1 million.
It's well over $1 million.
Yeah. So
we're doing pretty good.
And that's what we talked about the last meeting was, don't fund any more because you did have a little bit more risk. Let's use some of those reserve dollars, that's what they're for, to help with this particular situation. Okay? Now, that situation is continuing to be ongoing, and I'll come back to that. If you flip the page real quick, in comparison, so far this year, you've spent, outside of that one particular, you spent $221,000. If you look at the next page and you would add up the first 6 months of last year, which is page 2. This is, if you just 6 months total paid claims, if you add all those up, in the third column over, $205,000. So you're running about $16,000 hotter on everything else.
Year-to-year comparison.
Without that one big situation.
Yeah.
So that's not bad.
Otherwise, we're doing pretty par for the course as far as that one situation goes.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. Now, I do want to show you this aggregating deductible, why we have that in there. Last year, remember I said that aggregating deductible of $50,000, it's dollar for dollar off of the premiums. Most years you end up spending that. Last year you saved $32,000 because we took it off the premiums and you'd only pay for it if it happened. Well, you didn't end up paying, you only paid $18,000 of that $50,000. So you won that game last year by $32,000. So, but yeah, so that's that's kind of the snapshot right now. You did end up having a pretty decent year. If you look at the laser column right there, again, there was the same situation, had 125. Well, they did not spend that whole 125, and so again, it wasn't built into the premium. So you won in that scenario on that last year as well. Again, I know this can get real crazy, so please ask me any questions. There's no silly question when it comes to this. Before we move on, anything else? Anything on there? Okay. So far this year, you've got this report here is what we call the 50% report. Anybody who spent 50% of the $45,000 deductible you have, or 50% if they're a higher deductible. Like right now, we have 2 higher deductibles. One of them has spent 100%, which is on here right now. Again, no names are on here, but it's spent almost $179,000 so far this year. Good news is, well, there's good and bad news. They've hit their limit, but you could still spend that $50,000 aggregating deductible on that individual as well. So you could end up spending $225,000 on that one situation this year. And then stop loss will kick in after that. Okay. The next page is was the previous year, and you had 4 individuals who had hit that the year before. The first one was just underneath, and that was all prescription drug coverage. The second one is the same person as last year, as the current year. The third one is a spouse, has some diabetic situations.
Yeah, so last year, dependent 01, we spent $170,000. This year to date, dependent number 1, we've spent $178,925.
Last year you spent 90.
Okay. 90. Oh, right here. Okay.
Yep, on the paid year-to-date column.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I was adding in.
Yep. No problem. No problem. Yeah, 01 and 01, that's 2 different folks.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. All 4 of these are different folks
Yeah.
on there. Yep. Okay. I'm gonna pause right here. Talking about COVID funding and those kind of things. Do you happen to know, was the county provided any funding that would go towards any COVID situations with their employees where you're given I'm giving an example, the school district, for example, and the college both in Great Bend were given money that if they can show that it was used towards COVID type situations, for example, the college had somebody who spent $170,000 on COVID medical claims, they were able to get reimbursed for those.
We were.
You weren't, but that, okay, I just wanted to make sure, I didn't think so,
No.
but with all the different buckets that you're
Yeah.
talking
No,
about,
we weren't.
because you did have some, you have had over the last year, not significant, but you have had, if I remember right, I looked at it last week, it was about $30,000 to $40,000 in medical claims that were due to
COVID-related.
COVID related. That if there was a bucket like that, then you could potentially look at reimbursing yourself into your fund with those. So if you run across something like that,
Okay.
ever,
No, we
keep
don't.
that in mind. I think it was pretty much
Schools.
schools is what I've seen so far. But who knows, with all of the funds, they may end up trying to figure out how to utilize those funds before they lose them, and they might expand as well, so.
Yeah.
And then lastly, these are your dental plans, again, the last 2 years. The current year's running right spot on. You guys combine these with your medical funds and everything, so, what you technically would have set aside for dental, you're right at about 100%, just a little under that. And then the year before, you did run a little bit hot in
Yeah, this
in
total-
14.
This total EMP on the first page,
Uh-huh,
it's 225. And then, oh yeah, I guess that is about half, yeah. Never mind. 470, 225, yeah.
yeah.
They're all about half, right?
Yes,
We're
'cause
running
this-
about good, 84 to 161, 56 to 110. Am I looking at that right?
That's just the number of employees that are on the plan.
Okay.
In those first columns, like you have in the month of January, you had 14 singles,
And all the
9 employee spouses, and so it totals 36, and then that 225 number. The only number you really need to look at here is the two right in the middle, the monthly attachment point, which is about 7,000, and the monthly dental claims paid about 6,700.
Yeah,
So you're running good on that. And again, those funds historically are all put in the same pool. And so if you're up a couple thousand or you're down a couple thousand on the dental plan, it's not, if we look over a 5-year period, you're gonna run extremely well.
And your dental plan numbers aren't gonna match your health numbers because dental is optional.
yeah.
And a lot of them don't take it, so.
So from a renewal standpoint, the last thing I had for you is that, so we will take everything to the market starting in September. We'll take your claims experience, we'll go to the market, and we will look at stop loss options. The ongoing situation will determine a lot about what your rates and factors and everything will look like. So, and depending on where, what the current prognosis is of that situation or any other situation will determine how much you pay for the premium and if you have anybody that has an increased specific deductible and they're not approved at that 45,000.
Do you want to continue with the self-insured, or do you want to shop out insurance this year? Please say just continue.
Yeah, I
You
kinda
wanna-
like
you
the
wanna-
self-insurance.
If you want,
I mean, we're starting to
that's-
get phone calls about people wanting to know if we're gonna shop insurance
if you
this
want
year.
to
I
shop,
don't think
That's,
so.
that's the
So,
whole reason we've built up this huge reserve is to.
Yeah.
And it's worked for
Right,
us,
It is.
Yeah,
even in the bad years.
Because
it's
it'll
worked.
do this throughout the years. The one thing is that your other options right now will be to go fully insured. And fully insured, no matter what, is going to do this. I mean, you pay the premiums in, you might get a year where you have a flat renewal, or maybe they give you a 2% reduction or something like that. But ultimately, it's gonna continue to do this. What you have right now has gone, if we look back 10 years, it's gone up in the amount that you're paying for this. But it also then, you're able to build your reserves, and if you guys ever wanted to, you could say, you know what, this year, we're gonna fund 70% of, because our reserves have gotten to a point where we're gonna use some of those reserves to fund, if you ever wanna do that. We have a lot of groups who have built reserves like you, because right now, your reserves are 2 times your normal claims.
We have 1.8 in the reserve.
Well, so it's almost
Oh, wow.
3 times.
so if
Yeah.
we didn't have the 0-1 claim patient, I mean, our deal would really look good.
Absolutely.
And we would probably be able to start funding more, which would have it
Yeah.
come down.
Yep.
but on average, across a 20-year span, you're probably,
Or-
2/3 of the time you're gonna have a deal like this. I mean, this isn't uncommon, I guess, to have a situation ongoing.
It's not
I mean, with
uncommon,
47 on the plan, statistically, you're always gonna have something bad
Yeah.
going on. I mean, you would think.
Yeah, you know, I mean, just
Yeah.
like last year, for example, you had the same situation, was just starting at that point. So, but you still had a year where you built into your, I mean, you increased your reserve a little bit last year, even with those. Now, this year, we're probably not going to increase our reserve, which is fine though.
Yeah,
I mean,
'cause we've
that's-
got
That's why we have that.
Yeah,
reserve.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you could always, I mean, if you went fully insured, you could, and there's even other options from a self-funded standpoint that you can look at, that potentially could save you some dollars, but ultimately, it's about your stop-loss premiums, which I guarantee will go out to, your size limits you a little bit because you're under 50 employees, and some stop-loss carriers won't start unless you have 50 or more, but there's at least 8 to 10 really good carriers to go to that we do every year. And so as long as people are happy with your administration of your plan, then there's no reason to look at a new administrator. As long as everybody is able to see the doctors they want to see, you don't have network issues and those kind of things, then that's typically good in that regard. So really it boils down to the stop loss, you know, and you can't, some of these catastrophic claims, you can't control those.
Yep.
You know, you just can't. They're gonna happen. And people are gonna make the decisions they make and be compliant or not compliant with their conditions, and that's where our challenge is year in, year out.
Yeah.
So,
I do have a question that I think I should ask in the executive session. Should I wait till the very end, or what?
It's up to you. I mean,
I'd like to go into executive session for 5 minutes. Would it be for non-elected personnel or for medical
no, not
confidentiality?
elected.
All right, to discuss non-elected
and
personnel.
you want to include,
Mike, 3 commissioners needed.
Second.
okay, it's been moved and second, we go into executive session for non-elected personnel with Mike and the commissioners Anita present. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carried.
So, but we'll know a lot more in September.
Okay.
Timeframe, I'll have some better, I'll know where we're sitting at that point from a potential, so.
So in the meantime, could you look, you know, what our deductibles are today per individual and what the premium is? Would you also look at a higher deductible and what the premium would be?
You bet, you bet. What we can do, we have a benchmarking tool that would show you from a comparison purposes as well, compared to not only, we can look at it from like region. We can also look at it against other counties, and what they're doing, from a deductible and those kind of things, just to show where you are at comparison wise. And then we can absolutely look at, what an increase in your deductible would maybe do to
To
your
reflect on
premiums.
the premium.
Yeah, now always remember though, you're self-funded, so you
Right,
create
right.
your own plan.
Right.
And remember that increasing the deductibles and stuff, all that does is it shifts dollars
Yeah.
from what you're putting into the claims pool is now so much, before you get into that, is members are spending more dollars. So it may not lower the overall risk of your plan, but it makes it so you don't get into these dollars faster. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I think kind of what Clay's getting at is, we've got a little bit of a concern as far as when I feel like we have a really good medical plan for our employees. So when we're trying to hire somebody, our starting wage is not very well, but if you look at the health plan, it almost matches the hourly,
The value of our health
Yeah,
plan.
and we're not
Sure.
looking to save money, but
Can you pay more here and less here?
can we,
That's what we're trying to, or at least consider,
Mhm.
compare.
when they're looking, because it's hard to find someone who look at what we're willing to start them out at, and they're going, we're not doing that, but they won't, a lot of people don't look at the health plan, their benefits.
Aren't our deductibles fairly low compared to everybody else?
They are.
That's why.
They are extremely low
Yeah.
compared to everybody else.
Yeah.
I guess I understand the concept of basically trading dollars, on the deductible versus what you're putting away, but we're just trying to get our starting wage up, I guess.
I guess what it boils
I guess
down to
that's
is
some
how much
money.
am I gonna put in the bank every month?
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of them feel that the more they put in the bank, they really don't care about it.
Well, nobody kills a bear
Well,
health
this
insurance
is-
till you-
Until they need
till you
it.
need
Till
it.
you
So what we can do is we can look at a benchmark to see here's what others have for deductibles, right? And then we can take that plan and we can do what's called a plan model, and we can look back at your previous years, a couple of years, and say, okay, if you would have had this new deductible, this is the savings you would have had, and then you could look to see, does that make sense then? Can we do that going forward and use those dollars to pay more? Does that?
That'd be
That's
great.
kind
Is
of-
that
That'd
what
be
you're
great.
looking for?
Yeah, that's kind of what we'd like to, something
Absolutely.
like that.
Yep, that'd be great.
And what we're trying to do is lower the overall age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, recruiting and retention right now is everybody's obviously issue, and it's, outside of some things that I've seen unique-wise from, and I don't know if you guys can even do that, but referral bonuses and sign-on bonuses and some of those kind of things, when you start talking about that. I don't know if counties can even do that or not, but that's the only thing that we've seen from any success.
I don't know whether we can do it, I think it'd be a bad deal, because it'd cause a mutiny in the county. amongst
The
all
ones that are already
employees.
catered, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and some of the other employers probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, yeah, we'll plan on that, and I may try to set that meeting up in September to have that
That'd be
discussion.
great.
That'd be
before
great.
Because it'd be
we
for
actually
next
get-
year's.
Right.
We'd be looking
Yeah.
at it for,
We'll have talked about it till, start thinking about it in June,
Yeah.
May, June, something like
yeah.
that.
So if we start talking about this late this fall or this fall, have it ready by next spring, and
Perfect.
if we want to make a change.
Yep,
Yep.
Okay.
can do it, thank
Thanks,
you.
Mike.
Yes,
Have a safe trip.
I will, see you later.
I make a motion that we approve the July 14th minutes.
Second.
Been moved and secondly adopted minutes of July 14th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. No tax rolls, nothing like that. Okay,
Mike wants.
yeah,
Do you take 5 minutes?
so,
I make a motion that we go into executive session for 5 minutes to discuss attorney-client privilege,
and then adjourn.
including the sheriff, county attorney, Nita, and the commissioners.
And then we'll adjourn after that?
I don't have anything else.
I don't.
Okay.
I need to know about the budget. Are you good with the budget numbers? went over it last week, Melissa needs to know.
I thought she was gonna, I thought we were changing something, or,
No, no.
did she, the one you gave us last week, had she taken the extension deal out of there?
Yeah, it's out.
Can we have one more week to look at that?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, the motion on the floor is we go into executive session
No, you're fine.
to discuss attorney-client privileges with Rob, Mike, Nita, and the commissioners, and then we'll adjourn after that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried.
Thanks, Carol.